I think one of the mistakes that the United States has made is that, ironically, their military is still living in the 20th century. So aircraft carriers and bases that are close by to our borders are obviously going to be very vulnerable and useless. And in future, if there's any conflict, it's easy to strike those bases. So I don't think really the United States, for its own interests, would continue to remain in the Persian Gulf. And I think that the era of aircraft carriers is also coming to an end as well. And so Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the Emirates, Bahrain, these countries in particular, they have hosted US bases. So has Oman, so has Turkey, and so has Jordan. But these countries that are alongside the coast, their bases have been very openly conspiring against the Iranians. Their territory has been used even outside the bases to fire missiles at Iran. So from the Iranian perspective, they are fully complicit in the murder of Iranian citizens. And since they're so close by and since they're so vulnerable, because these countries are literally completely dependent on natural resources, on oil and gas. For example, Iran has extensive agriculture, it has an industrial base, but these countries are more or less dependent and they're very small as well. So they have huge amounts of armaments bought from the United States and the Europeans, but they can't use them. Qatar, which has a population of 350 to 400,000, doesn't even have the manpower to be able to use those sort of weapons. And the same is true in Kuwait and the Emirates and Bahrain as well. So this was a major miscalculation. The Americans miscalculated, the Israeli regime miscalculated, but the Israeli regime is willing to sacrifice everyone else for itself. The global economy is in a mess. The Israeli regime doesn't care. So they miscalculated, but they really don't care what happens to others. These countries in the Persian Gulf that have allowed the United States to use their territory to conspire against Iran, they are being hit very hard. They are guilty and they're being hit. And the Americans, I think, underestimated what the Iranians are doing. Some say that the Americans, Trump said he never thought this would happen. Others say that the American armed forces predicted this. At the end of the day, what is clear is that we've been saying this for years. We've been saying that if there's an attack and these regimes are used against Iran, they're going to pay the price. And ultimately, they may pay the ultimate price. This is a catastrophic situation for the world. It's not a war that the United States can win. And it's quite possible that the United States may launch ground offensive tonight or tomorrow night. We don't know. But since it's the weekend and the market's closed, I think it's quite possible, especially since Trump gave another extension of 10 days for striking Iranians' electrical power plants, which is a crime against humanity, and no one in the West seems to care. But that extension, I think, is obvious that he knows that the Iranians will strike back hard. But it also, in my personal opinion, it may be that he wants to deceive Iran and carry out a ground offensive tonight. It's just a possibility. I have no idea whatsoever. But the fact that we negotiated with the Trump regime twice in the last year, and on both occasions, as we were negotiating, Trump and Netanyahu carried out a blitzkrieg attack against the country and waged war twice against Iran, trying to use those negotiations to deceive Iran. I think it's quite possible that this 10-day extension has much more sinister elements to it than appears. But again, this is just sheer speculation on my behalf. I don't think the Iranians are worried at all. Actually, I think they would prefer a ground invasion to take place because they want this war to be the last war. And so they want to hurt the Trump regime in a way in which he and the political establishment in the United States never again think about attacking Iran. Because we had the war 9 months ago. Iran had the upper hand. They asked for a ceasefire. Ultimately, the Iranians accepted a halt in hostilities. And then here we are again with a much bigger force. So the Iranians are saying, we have to end this war in a way in which no one ever again thinks about invading the country. So even though there will be casualties, even though war is horrible, but I think the Iranians prefer a ground offensive, and they are confident that Trump will fail. With regards to logistics, obviously these Arab regimes are going to have to be central to this, and that, of course, reinforces the argument that they are part of this war. We'll have to wait and see. Again, this is my speculation that there may be an attack tonight. Clark Island does not have any oil itself. It is where the oil is transported to tankers. If the United States takes the island, nothing happens. If okay, let's say they block Iran's oil exports. Well, they can block Iran's oil exports now from outside the Persian Gulf. That would only drive the price of energy higher. But if they take the island, obviously that's going to be an escalation. And the Iranians are going to retaliate by destroying the infrastructure, oil and gas infrastructure on the other side of the Persian Gulf. So that is only going to make the crisis much worse, because what is now, to a large degree, a short and medium term crisis, if there is an escalation and oil and gas assets and infrastructure are destroyed, then it becomes a permanent crisis. It'll create a global economic depression that will impact everyone across the world, you, me, Europe and North America, everywhere. So taking Hark Island doesn't achieve anything. There's nothing significant about such an act. But I think the Iranians are pretty confident that their islands are all well protected. Any attack on any of them will bring about great difficulty for the United States, and they're not going to achieve anything. Let's say that ultimately the United States takes an island or two islands or three islands. Iran will keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. The Strait of Hormuz is not closed by the Iranians through soldiers who are standing on the shore. The Iranian capabilities come from underground missile bases that are hundreds of kilometers away from the Persian Gulf. And Iran has access to the entire Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. So they can fire missiles from anywhere and strike tankers. They can strike oil and gas facilities. So taking a couple of islands is only going to make the situation worse, and it's going to lead to the Trump regime losing soldiers. It doesn't make any sense, but Trump is a gambler, and he is, I think, increasingly desperate. One is that he escalates. You have a ground invasion, and it only makes things worse, because that will lead to Iran destroying the infrastructure on the other side of the Persian Gulf. And then that's the end of the oil and gas trade and petrochemicals and fertilizers from this region for the years to come. The second is for him to continue with what he's doing now and carry out strikes, carry out a few very heavy airstrikes against Iran, intensify the campaign for a couple of days. But that is only going to lead to the escalation of the crisis, because oil and gas is not getting through the Strait of Hormuz. So he can keep bombing, but the real issue is the Strait of Hormuz. That's where Iran has Trump by the throat. And the third is for him to do what he did in Yemen, declare victory and walk away, whereas he had failed in Yemen. He can walk away with regards to Iran, but that still won't resolve the problem, because Iran says we're not going to go back to this former status quo. And Iran is going to change the political relationships that exist in the Persian Gulf region, because it will no longer allow these tiny Arab family dictatorships to be staging grounds for assaults on Iran. So there's no easy way out of this. All of them, I think, will ultimately lead to Trump's humiliation and his fall. So I don't think Iran is interested at all in negotiating right now, and there are no plans at all to meet the Americans. What happened was that the Americans sent a text or a message to the Iranians, which is not new. Messages have been going back and forth between Iran and the United States for decades. Sometimes they go through one country, sometimes they go through another, sometimes they go through multiple countries, from Oman, from Qatar, from Pakistan, of course, from Turkey, from Russia. So messages do go back and forth. This is not a new thing. I think Trump hyped up this in order to bring down the price of oil, to manipulate the market. Iran said they're not interested in this, and they declared what needs to happen for an end to the hostilities. Iran has said that we don't want a ceasefire, because a ceasefire basically will allow Trump and Netanyahu to regroup and to carry out another attack 6 months from now, a year from now, and there's nothing to stop them. The political regime in Washington, the media, when it comes to Iran, they're all more or less in the same camp. Unless things go south, then they go after Trump. It's not as if they care about the slaughter of children at a elementary school that we saw on the first day of this assault. So the Iranians are saying we have to change the facts on the ground, as I was saying a bit earlier, that Kuwait, the Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia would never again be able to be staging grounds for an offensive. And they would have to pay reparations. I think that if that happens, automatically it becomes much more difficult for the United States ever to attack Iran because they need these countries and the airspace and the territory and of course the money to carry out these acts of violence.